They say betrayal doesn't announce itself, it slips in quietly, disguised as something ordinary. But the moment it happens, your body knows before your mind catches up. For me, it was at the opening of the Temporal Shadows exhibit at the Livingston Brooks Art Center. A pretentious title, sure, but Catherine loved it. She'd been working on it for months, late nights, early calls, her inbox flooding with curator emails and event coordinator spreadsheets. It was her biggest professional event of the year, maybe of her entire career. She treated it like a newborn, fussing over the tiniest details. She even hired a string quartet. I thought it was excessive, but I showed up anyway, suit pressed, gift in hand, proud. That night, the gallery looked beautiful. Soft amber lights shimmered off white walls, champagne flutes caught the glow like tiny beacons, and modern pieces of steel and fabric stood in curated defiance of logic. It wasn't my world, not really. I was a woodworker by trade. I build things you can touch, things that hold weight. But Catherine's world was different, ephemeral, aesthetic, filled with meanings you had to squint to see. Still, I'd always supported her. Always. I watched her float across the gallery floor, greeting patrons, laughing that polished kind of laugh she reserved for people with titles. She was radiant, wearing a fitted emerald dress I hadn't seen before. Her hair pinned up like it belonged in a Vogue feature. She didn't notice me right away, and that was okay. I stayed toward the back, letting her soak in the spotlight. Then came the awards portion, the recognition of contributors as the pamphlet called it. Catherine took the mic, beaming, confident in the way she got when something was going exactly how she planned. Tonight, she said, is not just about the art. It's about the people who believed in it. People who challenged us to look further, think deeper, and see more clearly. One of those people is our new exhibition director, Joel Bennett. Applause. Polite, professional. A few nods of approval. I knew Joel, not well, but enough to spot the undercurrent. Former museum consultant turned gallery darling. Clean-cut, artsy, sharp. Catherine had mentioned him once or twice in passing. Said he understood her vision. Back then, I brushed it off as gallery talk. She motioned him forward. He stepped up, modest, with that curated shyness people in the art world love to perform. She handed him a framed appreciation certificate and leaned in. That's when it happened. She kissed him. Not on the cheek. Not even quite on the lips. But too close, the corner of his mouth. It lingered. Just long enough for it to register as something in asterisk mate. And the room responded. People smiled, some laughed like they were in on a secret. One woman near me nudged her date with a smirk. There was a quiet sense of confirmation, like they'd suspected this all along and now had their proof. And Joel? He didn't flinch. Didn't pull back. He smiled like it was earned. I stood frozen for a second, hoping I had misunderstood what I saw. Hoping there was some performance angle, some ironic commentary I wasn't hip enough to understand. But I wasn't wrong. When I approached, Catherine didn't skip a beat. She turned to me and said, with that same smooth tone she used during gallery tours, "Oh hey, can you help with the lighting notes later?" Lighting notes? Not "hi babe," not "there you are." Nothing familiar. Nothing personal. Just transactional. Cold. Like I was a colleague. "Don't mind us," she added, turning to the crowd. "It's all part of the performance. Art, right?" Laughter. A ripple through the gallery. Everyone seemed amused. Delighted even. Everyone but me. I smiled automatically, instinctively, because what else do you do when you're in the middle of a crowd and you realize your wife is using performance art to cover an affair? I smiled to protect myself. I smiled to keep the world from seeing what I felt, like I'd just been hit by a truck while wearing a tuxedo. My mind tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was performance. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe this was just theater, some clever commentary on an asterisk Macy and perception. But my gut said otherwise. Because I knew Catherine. I knew the way her body language changed when she was near someone she admired. I knew the way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear when she was flirting. I knew the way she said it's nothing when it was, in fact, something. And right now, every part of her was screaming something. I watched her with Joel, the way they stood close, the way his hand hovered just behind her back like it had a right to be there. The way she didn't flinch when he leaned in to whisper something. These were not gestures built overnight. This was familiarity. Comfort. And I realized then, I wasn't part of this world anymore. Not really. I stayed for the rest of the event because leaving would have drawn attention. I shook hands, accepted compliments about how lucky I must be to be with someone as talented as Catherine. I nodded, thanked them, pretended I wasn't falling apart behind my smile. At one point, I caught her glancing my way. Just once. A flicker of something in her eyes, guilt maybe? Or calculation. But she looked away just as quickly, back to Joel, back to her world. And I stood there, alone in a room full of people who believed the lie she had just told so beautifully, that this was all art. That it meant nothing. But it meant everything. It was the beginning of the unraveling. I didn't know the full truth yet, not the depth, not the history. But I knew without a shred of doubt that whatever Catherine and Joel had, it wasn't professional. And it wasn't new. She didn't introduce me that night. Think about that. I was her husband. 10 years. Dozens of openings. Gallery dinners, lectures, fundraisers. And tonight, the biggest event of her career, she didn't introduce me to anyone. Not once. I left before the end. Said I wasn't feeling well, which wasn't a lie. My chest felt tight, like my ribs had caved in. On the drive home, I kept replaying it, the kiss, the laughter, the way her voice dropped an octave when she said it's all part of the performance. It wasn't just betrayal. It was performance dressed in silk and smiles. I got home and sat in the dark for hours, the silence louder than anything I'd heard at the gallery. I stared at the empty couch, at the glass of wine she'd left on the table 2 nights ago, lipstick still on the rim. I thought about all the little things, the late meetings, the unread messages, the shift in her laugh when she was on the phone, and thought I couldn't hear. The pieces had been there all along. I just hadn't wanted to see them. Not until now. And now? I couldn't unsee them if I tried. The next morning, the exhibit was all over the arts section. Joel's name got top billing. Catherine's too, bold, italicized, glowing. A visionary pairing, one review called them. Pairing. Not collaboration. Not co-directors. Pairing. The word throbbed like a fresh bruise. She came home around noon. I was already at the kitchen table, pretending to read emails I'd checked hours earlier. She walked in like nothing had happened. Hung her coat, kicked off her shoes, poured a glass of orange juice. Like we weren't coming apart. Morning, she said, voice bright but distant. You left early last night. I wasn't feeling great. Yeah. I could tell. A pause. You okay now? I nodded. She didn't push. She never did anymore. The old Catherine would have sat beside me, touched my arm, asked again for real. But this version of her was a ghost wrapped in skin and soft sarcasm. She breezed past me and disappeared upstairs. That was the day I admitted it to myself, something was wrong. Not a blip. Not stress. Not one of those quiet spells couples go through. This was different. This was rupture pretending to be routine. And once I saw it, I started seeing everything else. Like how often I came home to an empty house. How her text replies had shrunk to single words. Busy. Later. Can't. Or how her phone, once freely passed between us when I needed to check a calendar or take a quick picture, was now permanently face down, silent, and locked. I didn't know the passcode anymore. That realization hit me in the middle of a grocery store aisle. I was buying coffee, reached for her phone to check our shared notes, and it locked me out. I stared at the screen, stunned. 4 digits, that's all it took to separate our lives. I asked her about it later. Oh yeah. Work security, she said. New protocol. Annoying, right? She said it casually, like a receptionist reading from a script. I let it slide. At the time, I still believed in the version of her who would never lie to me. But belief doesn't stop erosion. It just delays collapse. And then there was the trip to Orlando, or so she said. It was the weekend before Christmas. She told me she was visiting her grandmother. I didn't question it. The woman was 89, had been in and out of the hospital twice that year. Catherine packed light, left early, promised to FaceTime when she landed. Only she didn't. I got one text, landed safe. Spotty Wi-Fi. Love you. Except the night after she left, we had dinner plans with my sister, a standing tradition. I called to let her know Catherine wouldn't make it. Orlando, I explained. My sister raised an eyebrow. Really? That's odd. I could have sworn I saw her tagged in a photo yesterday, something about a sculpture park. In Texas, I think. I laughed it off at the time. Must be old. But when I got home, something gnawed at me. I opened our shared Google Calendar, empty. Weird, considering Catherine tracked everything. Then, out of some strange instinct, I opened the Find My app. She'd left her location on by accident. And for one brief, flickering moment, I saw it. Marfa, Texas. Not Orlando. Marfa. The dot blinked on the edge of the map for barely 3 seconds before disappearing. Like it had caught itself misbehaving. I refreshed. Gone. Location unavailable. Later, I asked her how her grandmother was. She said better. That she'd made soup and watched old movies and didn't even check her email all weekend. Total digital detox, she said, smiling like she believed her own script. I nodded, said nothing, and felt something inside me begin to crack. I still didn't want to believe it. I had known Catherine for over a decade. We'd built a life, a routine, a rhythm. We had traditions, furniture, passwords we used for streaming services. She knew how I took my coffee. I knew she hated eating the end slices of bread. We had history. That's what made it so hard. People talk about betrayal like it's a sudden shattering, a loud break. But for me, it was quieter, like the creaking of old wood just before it splits. It was finding receipts for dinners she never mentioned. A change in perfume. The way she started locking her studio door when I walked by. The most obvious things were the quietest. Like how we stopped celebrating things. She missed our anniversary. Claimed she was at a gallery dinner. I waited at the restaurant for 43 minutes before the hostess came over and awkwardly asked if I'd like to cancel the reservation. I said yes. I sat in the car afterward, hands on the steering wheel, staring at the glowing digits on the dash. 11 years married. I went home and found her asleep on the couch, still in her work clothes. A takeout container beside her. She stirred when I walked in. Hey, you eat. I didn't say anything. You okay? Still nothing. She blinked at me, confused. Wait, is today? She sat up. Babe, I'm so sorry. The calendar, I thought. Don't worry about it, I said, my voice flat. She looked like she wanted to argue, but instead, she curled up tighter and closed her eyes again, like apologizing had earned her rest. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I walked through the house in the dark, touched the edges of our life, the bookshelf we built together, the gallery wall of black and white vacation photos, the wedding photo with her smile so wide it looked like sunlight. What changed? And when? It wasn't one thing. That's what people don't get. Affairs don't explode out of nowhere. They erode. Slowly, quietly, while you're still paying the bills and taking out the trash and asking, what do you want for dinner? Every night like everything's fine. But it wasn't fine. And I couldn't ignore it anymore. The suspicion had taken root. It lived in my chest, under my ribs. It followed me into the shop, into my dreams. It showed up in every silence, every unanswered call, every stretch of time she couldn't explain. I started noticing how often Joel's name came up, casually, slipped into stories like seasoning. Joel thinks the layout needs more breathing room. Joel suggested we rehang the centerpiece. Joel said the press release needed a stronger opening. Always Joel. Always said with the kind of admiration that felt a little too personal. One night, she left her tablet charging on the coffee table. She was upstairs on a call. Gallery board emergency, she claimed. I opened the tablet. It was still logged in to her email. And though I didn't look, not yet, I knew then I would. Eventually, because I needed to know. Not for revenge. Not even for closure. But for truth. For reality. Because living in doubt is worse than knowing. Doubt corrodes everything. I turned off the tablet. Left it where I found it. She came downstairs 20 minutes later, smiled like nothing had happened, and kissed my forehead. Felt like a lie. And somewhere deep down I knew the truth wasn't hiding anymore. It was waiting. I didn't expect a parking ticket to be the thing that broke the illusion. I don't even remember why I opened the mail that day. Catherine usually handled the bills. But there it was, buried between a credit card statement and a glossy brochure from some modern furniture catalog she subscribed to. City of Austin Notice of Violation. At first, I thought it was a mistake. We lived in New Mexico. Her supposed location the day of the violation was New York. She'd said she had a remote seminar to lead for the East Coast art collective she consulted with. That morning she'd even kissed me goodbye, made a comment about having to wear real pants for Zoom, and said, "Don't be surprised if I ignore you all day. This group's intense." But the ticket didn't lie. The timestamp read 1:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, corner of 5th and Brazos. A black Audi A5, her car. Plate number matched. The violation. Parking in a commercial zone without a permit. It felt like someone had pressed pause on my entire world. I reread the fine print a dozen times. Checked the date, the VIN, the make and model. All hers. My ears rang. My mouth went dry. I sat there at the kitchen counter, staring at that slip of paper like it had pulled a rug out from under my feet. It wasn't a mistake. She hadn't been in New York. She had been in Austin. And she had lied. That night I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I watched her eat leftover pasta, sipping a glass of Malbec, making small talk about some critic who had butchered their last show. I smiled, nodded, let her words wash over me like white noise. Because I needed to be sure. The next day, while she was at a planning session, I opened her tablet again. It was still linked to her cloud account, the one she always said she barely used, preferring physical notebooks and her phone. But she hadn't logged out. And that was her mistake. The screen opened to the photo app. Nothing new in the main roll, but I clicked into the recently added folder, a place most people forget exists. That's when the breath left my body. There they were. Dozens of photos. All taken within the last few weeks. A few were from inside hotel rooms, white sheets, breakfast trays, city view windows. Others were closer, her hands holding a mug I'd never seen before, bare feet on an unfamiliar balcony, her reflection in a bathroom mirror wearing his hoodie. And then the one that stopped me completely. A selfie. Her and Joel. Smiling. Relaxed. She had her head on his shoulder. He was in a t-shirt, arm wrapped around her like it belonged there. Not rushed. Not guilty. Comfortable. Familiar. There was no caption. No cryptic filters. Just them. Together. Like it was the most natural thing in the world. And suddenly it all clicked. The missed anniversaries. The mystery meetings. The trip to Orlando. The art performance kiss that wasn't a kiss. It was never performance. It was real. She hadn't just been drifting emotionally. She had left me emotionally months ago. She was still living in our house, eating at our table, using the laundry detergent I bought, but her life, the one that mattered, was with him. Elsewhere. Offline. Just out of reach. I stared at the photos until my eyes stung. Then I backed out of the folder, closed the tablet, and walked outside. It was raining, light, cold, steady. The kind that doesn't drench you but still manages to sink in. I stood on the porch and let it hit my face. I needed it. I needed something real. Something not curated or manipulated. Because in that moment, the truth was undeniable. I wasn't her partner anymore. I was her placeholder. The man she left behind while she built a new life that fit the person she had quietly become. And I don't know how long I stood there. Maybe 10 minutes. Maybe 30. But when I walked back in, I felt different. Not angry. Not even heartbroken. Just emptied. I didn't confront her that night. I couldn't. What would I say? I found the photos, Catherine. I know about the hotel room. I know about Joel. She would deny, deflect, cry. Maybe twist it into some vague metaphor about art and self-discovery. She'd tell me I didn't understand. And she'd be right. I didn't understand. Because I never thought we'd get here. Instead, I pretended. I ate dinner with her. I asked about her work. I played the part one was supposed to play. And the irony wasn't lost on me. She had turned our marriage into a performance and I had become her supporting actor. Only I wasn't reading from her script anymore. I was making my own. Later that night, while she slept peaceful, undisturbed, I sat in my office and opened a manila folder I hadn't touched in months. Inside were legal documents I'd drafted earlier in the year, back when I first felt something fracture. They weren't active yet, just contingency plans. At the time, I told myself I was being paranoid. But now? Now they were necessary. I reviewed every page, a drafted separation agreement, a list of shared accounts, a notarized but unsigned transfer of vehicle ownership. I'd even written a resignation letter for her role on our joint business license, a woodworking/art collab we once ran together before her solo career took off. I wasn't angry while I worked. I was surgical. I changed my online banking passwords, closed a shared savings account, canceled her access to my credit card. Not in a rage, not as revenge. Just to protect myself. To reclaim my space. When I finished, I stared at the screen and felt something I hadn't in months. Control. Not over her. Over me. I printed one thing before going to bed, a single sheet of paper. Not a letter. Just a formal notice. It read, "This is to inform you that effective immediately, I am initiating the process of formal separation. All relevant legal documents are enclosed. Please direct all questions to counsel. There will be no further discussion." I folded the paper in thirds and set it on her pillow. Then I went to sleep in the guest room. The next morning, she didn't notice right away. She made coffee, took a call on speaker, laughed. It wasn't until late morning that I heard the silence. A kind of stillness settle over the house. She hadn't called my name, hadn't stormed into the guest room, hadn't cried. Just silence. And that, more than anything else, told me everything I needed to know. She didn't deny it. She didn't fight it. She didn't even pretend to be shocked. Because the truth wasn't a surprise to her. Only to me. The hardest part wasn't leaving her. It was realizing she'd already left me. That morning, after I heard the silence stretch between us like a thread ready to snap, I stayed in the guest room and listened. The sound of drawers opening. A slow, measured shuffle of her footsteps across the hardwood floor. A cabinet creaked, then closed. The kettle clicked off. The little sounds of a person trying to move like nothing had changed, as if there wasn't a separation notice waiting for her on the pillow we once shared. She didn't knock on the guest room door. Didn't ask where I was. Didn't burst in crying or demanding explanations. For a while, I wondered if she'd read the paper at all. Maybe she'd folded it neatly and tucked it away like a receipt for something she'd rather forget. But then I heard the sound that confirmed everything, a single suitcase being wheeled across the hall. She was leaving. Not gone for good, not yet. Just gone for now. For the weekend, maybe. A friend's place, a hotel. Somewhere else. Somewhere she didn't have to look at the life she'd taken a match to. Still, I didn't move. I stayed there in the spare room, listening to her fade. The door closed. The car started. Tires over gravel. Silence. And I exhaled. Not relief. Not quite. Just the kind of breath you take when something tight finally gives way. That afternoon, I went into our bedroom. The note I had left was gone. So were some of her clothes. Makeup bag missing. Her favorite black coat. But her laptop was still on the desk, closed. Her tablet still charging on the nightstand. She hadn't packed to run. She was circling. Orbiting. Maybe to see if I'd change my mind. But I didn't. Instead, I opened my laptop and spent the next 6 hours doing what needed to be done. First, I contacted my lawyer. Not the one I used for business filings, a different one. One I'd quietly researched back in March when Catherine started spending more weekends traveling for installations. I had bookmarked her firm's website under a fake folder labeled tax stuff. I emailed her a brief message, "It's time. Please review the draft docs and prepare for filing. We'll keep it civil, but I want clarity." She responded within the hour. Then came the accounts. I logged into our shared financial dashboard and began the process of separation. Anything tied to my personal work, my furniture commissions, my licensing royalties, I isolated. I froze a joint account we used for home expenses. Not to be vindictive, but because I no longer trusted her version of what counted as home. Next, I canceled a reservation. This one hit harder than I expected. Catherine had booked a table at one of those rooftop restaurants downtown, a place we'd always talked about but never splurged on. She reserved it for our upcoming anniversary. I had found the confirmation email buried under a stack of receipts for her gallery project. It should have meant something. But I knew now it was a cover. A placeholder dinner. A performance to make me feel like nothing was wrong, like we still had traditions, rituals, memories worth toasting. I called the restaurant, gave the name, and canceled. The host didn't ask why. I didn't explain. I just hung up and stared at the screen for a long time, the cursor blinking in the empty search bar like it was waiting for me to look up how to survive a marriage falling apart. By the end of the day, my hands were shaking. Not from anger. Just from the sheer exhaustion of holding in every word I hadn't said. I wanted to scream. To throw something. To demand answers I already knew. But I didn't. Because Catherine didn't deserve that version of me, the broken one. She didn't get to provoke my worst self and then claim the moral high ground for staying calm. No. She got silence. Because silence has weight. It lingers. It fills the space left by trust, and it echoes louder than any argument ever could. That night, I slept in the guest room again. The bed was stiffer, the pillow thinner, but I slept better than I had in weeks. Maybe because I wasn't pretending anymore. Maybe because I wasn't waiting for her to come home smelling like a lie. The next morning, I woke up early. The house was still empty. No sign of her. But her location pinged from somewhere in town, a hotel near the Arts District. She hadn't gone far. Just far enough to not be questioned. I spent the day packing her things. Not everything, not yet. Just a box. I chose deliberately. The leather-bound notebook she used to sketch exhibit layouts. The scarf I got her from Portland she never wore. The little ceramic fox from our first road trip. A photo of us at Lake Tahoe, still in the original frame, untouched. And on top, the gallery pamphlet from the Livingston Brooks show, the one where she kissed Joel in front of a room full of strangers and called it art. I didn't leave a note. Didn't write a caption. Just closed the box and set it by the front door. She returned 3 days later. I was in the garage when I heard the car door. She didn't come find me. She walked inside, saw the box, and just stood there. I watched from the window. She didn't touch it. Didn't open it. She sat beside it like it was a suitcase that had arrived too early, a package she wasn't ready to claim. I didn't say anything. Not that day. Not the next. For a full week, we coexisted like strangers in a shared space. She took the guest room. I kept the master. We crossed paths in the kitchen, the hallway, once in the backyard. Small nods. Tension like humidity, thick, invisible, clinging to everything. She tried once. Late at night. I was in bed, half asleep, when I heard the knock. Soft. Hesitant. Then the door creaked open. She stood there in one of my old t-shirts, eyes red, holding a mug of tea like a peace offering. Can we talk? She asked. I looked at her for a long time. Looked at the woman who used to be my home. Then I shook my head. Not yet. She didn't argue. She just closed the door and walked away. And maybe that was the cruelest part. How easy it had become to walk away. The next morning, the box was gone. No note. No confrontation. Just an empty space where the memories used to be. I took that as a sign. Not of guilt. Not of closure. Just of acknowledgement. She knew. I knew.